All right, welcome, welcome. People streaming in. Welcome to This Clinical Life. And what I'm going to have you do as the first order of business, I'm going to have you open up your chat and let us know where you're viewing from. And we'd love to see where people are participating in their podcast. So just dive into the live chat, and this is going to be a warm up for what we're going to be doing later and fielding a little bit of questions. All right, we got Omaha, we've got Chicago, we've got Frisco, Texas, you got Indiana. Outstanding. Michelle, thank you for being here. And all right, North Virginia, South Carolina, New Mexico, fantastic. So anyway, welcome to This Clinical Life, proudly presented by Practicing Excellence. In this podcast, we explore the transformational impact of investing in the growth and development of our healthcare workforce, a powerful yet often overlooked catalyst in creating healthcare change. So incredibly excited about today's guest, Dr. Graham McMahon. He's an endocrinologist.
Proudly.
You're supposed to be seeing patients today, by the way.
There's certainly plenty of them to be seen.
Oh my goodness, in your field. President and Chief Executive Officer for ACCME, Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education, which sets the standards for high quality continuing medical education that improves physician competence and performance and contributes to healthcare improvement for patients and their communities. So Graham, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we've already become friends.
That's true. We're bonding over dogs.
Yes, dogs and just life philosophy things. So I want to ask you, going from being an endocrinologist to being president and CEO of this accrediting body of ACCME, tell me that story. And even before the endocrinology story. So give me a longitudinal time frame.
Well, it's been a remarkable, fascinating journey for me, and I never would have anticipated I'd be where I am. Like I think many of us in medicine, we end up on this path. But from a very young age, really wanted to be a doctor. Had nobody in my extended family who had ever gone to college, let alone been in a medical profession. And my parents thought I was frankly crazy growing up in Ireland. But I was persistent and single-minded. It was going to be the career for me. And so I entered medical school in Dublin, trained as a medical student and as a physician in Ireland, did 2 years as junior doctor in Ireland. But it was during that time that I really became an observer of teachers and a celebrant of learning, so to speak, and really enjoyed seeing the spark of new information accrue in my colleagues and in my teams, etc. So really became interested in education and teaching and learning and that skill. Came over to Boston in 1999 to do my residency in medicine at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, and then a fellowship in endocrinology there. And during that time, pursued a doctoral degree in education as well as a clinical trials master's. But it was really that time that I was also building my own skills as an educator, digitally, in person, small groups and big groups, and thinking about outcomes in education. But then, I was associate dean for continuing education at Harvard, and then editor at the New England Journal of Medicine, building their educational infrastructure and their images program and the Knowledge Plus program, all of those things. So I was very happy in Boston. I had no real instinct that I would leave, but this organization came calling, and a variety of colleagues said, this would be great. So here I am 9 years later, enjoying and working in clinical practice, teaching residents, medical students, fellows, and others in endocrinology, but also leading an organization towards trying to achieve its goals in supporting an educational infrastructure for doctors and healthcare professionals. That's ideal.
Well, I'm going to quote you on an article that you read, and I'm going to challenge you to answer the question for us.
Okay, bring it.
It says this. It says, and you'll probably remember writing this, but it says, there's something that caught my eye, certainly. It says, when I ask healthcare leaders how they are nurturing their most precious resource, it is rare I get anything but a furrowed brow. So
I think
Fill in fill in the
that
blanks
is
on
so
that.
true because I talk to healthcare leaders all the time. I talk to hospital administration. I talk to folks in charge of GME, et cetera. And uh, very few people seem to actually realize that they can do something with their extraordinary talent of these committed, motivated individuals who are capable and smart to make a difference. And they don't think of the ways in which they can invest in those people outside of compensation, for example,
Mhm.
or food on Fridays. And that approach to thinking about human development and nurturing cognitive growth and intellectual stimulation and the community in which they work and feeling supported and feeling like they can make a difference and being recognized for that, those types of human attributes are very intervenable on and very modifiable. And part of that is the process of learning and intellectual growth that helps these very smart people continue to be at their best. And if you don't invest in that, you will have lost one of your most fundamental opportunities, which is to invest in your people and help them build their skills and capabilities.
I have found a really interesting observation over the years. I've been working in the process of sort of building skills of people to help achieve outcomes for them, patients, communities, and mostly just from the trenches and making a ton of mistakes along the way in terms of what is it that really facilitates human behavioral change. But what I found commonly, and I want to ask you about, is that organizations set goals in safety and market share and patient experience and colleague engagement and turnover. But then I ask them, what are your people development strategies to allow that goal to manifest? And so frequently, and that's why that sentence resonated with me. We
You get the furrowed brow too.
we get the furrowed brow. Why is that? Why is it that organizations who are aiming to achieve a goal don't place the ultimate capacitator and catalyst to human behavioral change, which is human development? Why do you think we're seeing that in healthcare?
Well, two things cross my mind. The first is that an incorrect assumption that their healthcare team complete their training and are fully capable ever more thereafter. And therefore, why do we need to invest in our people training? Because they're already board certified, they're practicing. Surely they're excellent at their job and doing the best they could possibly be. So there's that assumption that complacency around this skill development is perfectly acceptable and reasonable. The second is that they assume that interventions that might modulate physician engagement or time management are doomed to failure, that they cannot and will not be successful in helping clinicians guide something that they consider to be intensely personal and not modifiable from a position of authority.
Well, and the other barrier that I've seen, and I think those are absolutely true in terms of why organizations are not necessarily investing in a people development strategy to achieve an outcome, which I think is a dependency in my observations, developing the skills to allow the future state to manifest. The other thing is economics. I've seen more and more, scrutiny around spend of organizations to achieve goals. And I want to see sort of what you're seeing in terms of how do we invest in our people and allocate resources to deploy a broader people development strategy? What are you seeing in terms of the receptiveness of organizations to deploy those efforts and those resources?
Yeah, I think there's two obvious factors going on here. One are the financial pressures are such that organizations who believe training and development is a compliance box and a checkbox, and that's something that they can both outsource and achieve at a low cost by doing so, are essentially sending their money outside their organization, bringing in a third party to do the minimal possible to make everybody compliant with, let's say, CME requirements, right? And that is so small-minded and so foolish that what you do is you just elaborate cynicism, and you create all sorts. You essentially reinforce this idea that professional development is a checkbox exercise, and that as long as it can be done the cheapest, quickest possible way to meet compliance requirements, you're done, right? That's one way in which the system is evolving, that smaller healthcare systems and those under the greatest financial pressure are saying, this is a compliance issue. Let's meet the compliance requirement in the cheapest possible way. The alternative approach, which you also see, particularly for some of the bigger systems, who have, I suppose, in some cases got both the resources and in some cases the wisdom to recognize that training and performance development is actually an investment in their people, and that it has manifest and highly cost effective outcomes when you do it, that they are investing in that. Now, they're investing it in a variety of ways. Some of them are essentially trading off the stipends that they might otherwise give to physicians and healthcare workers to spend on their own choices for educational
Mhm.
development, and instead investing in the organization's skill development programs, hiring educators, hiring content management specialists, hiring instructional designers to create an ecosystem and problem solving ethos and a continuous learning healthcare system ethos that drives the type of engagement and training and development that actually people want to attend, find useful, find productive uses of their time, and where you can't keep people out rather than trying to have to draw people into those old fashioned kind of grand rounds and podium presentations of yore.
I could not agree more. And I remember there's a report that I read from Gallup that said the engagement of people is most correlated with how an organization develops its people. And I have observed as well, and I think the literature strongly supports that when people are a participant in an organization that allows them to personally ascend, improve, advance, and become the kind of care team member that they've always envisioned for themselves, they're more loyal to that organization and they're more participatory in what the organization wants to become. And so it's such an incredibly powerful tool. Um, Another question I have is that CME is sometimes seen as sort of a clinical instrument to raise clinical capabilities. And that's certainly a channel of, how do we better manage heart failure and sepsis and all those super important things that we do. But there's a broader, more holistic approach in terms of the broad development of key other skills, if you will, that help advance the quality of care, culture of organizations, and the vitality and the well-being of individual care team members. Talk a little bit about that in terms of a wider aperture application of people development to those other areas.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things going on in an ecosystem that's driving personal development, and using education and learning to do so. I mean, if you think about kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have these needs for security and physical and physiologic needs, but then you have important issues related to belonging, to esteem, to self-actualization. And learning and development help individuals achieve those goals. Right? You think about, how do we achieve a safety need by using education? How do we achieve a belonging need? Well, education is a naturally convening force. People cluster together to learn from and with each other, particularly among sophisticated professionals. And that drives, and then groups of people learning together take care of each other. And they establish, say, how are you doing today, Stephen? You don't look so hot. You seem a bit sluggish. What's going on? Those types of super mini encounters create a culture of safety and belonging that help people grow. But then if you're bringing people together to learn, you can also leverage their ability to contribute and be seen to be doing so in their own environment, where they can actually have their capabilities be surfaced to their colleagues in a way that is very important for self-esteem. Because you get to things like self-esteem and its role in human performance, and education and learning and teaming does that when the teams are well constructed. And then you think about self-actualization right at the top of Maslow's hierarchy. You're really thinking about the individual achieving what they want for themselves. This idea that they are a competent clinician, they can make a difference, they are seeing that difference in the care that they provide and with the teams that they're working with. Those are the things you can do by just introducing a more effective educational infrastructure to support the natural learning that will occur if you just create the environment to allow it to do so.
And it's so beautifully said. And I've observed something similar in sort of coaching clinicians over the last couple of decades, is that when clinicians acquire a skill, for example, in patient connectivity, and are able to learn the skill of identifying what matters to the patient, how to activate them in self-care, how to identify what the circumstances are of their lives. Those are specific skills that we don't necessarily learn in our training. And when the physicians do those things, they apply those skills of asking a patient a question. Tell me, all that you're going through right now worries you the most. What is it that worries you the most in terms of your clinical circumstances? And the clinician is able to see and feel and experience that bond between patient and clinician by virtue of applying a skill. Not only do they continue to do that skill because, holy smokes, that question was super helpful in me finding out what the patient was really worried about, then they begin to actually speak and evangelize about the application of that skill to their colleagues, creating this diffusion to other clinicians regarding the thing that I learned and the thing that I applied. And so, what you're speaking about in terms of identity and, the process of learning and applying skills and what that does in that mastery process is so incredibly powerful. And when clinicians are learning and applying and growing, it's a huge driver of contentment and the convening force of learning together and belonging. I want to go back to an idea that you brought up previously, is that one of the barriers to a broader, more systemic people development strategy is the assumption that at the end of training, at the end of fellowship, they're ready to go, right? And they're going to have competencies in and the core things that make them a really contributory clinician. Um, what do you see as the key educational needs for the physician of tomorrow, the kind of physician that American healthcare needs? If you were to create a registry, if you will, a syllabus for the kind of clinicians that we need, what do you think?
So interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that comes immediately to mind for me actually is acculturating humility, right? Which is a very interesting thing for an educator to say. But uh, we in the House of Medicine and in healthcare tend to promote self-confidence, and we give people stature, and we give them very little feedback. And that ecosystem tends to create a sense of entitlement, complacency, self-confidence that is not always matched with the level of competence across the 5,000 skills a competent clinician must manifest every single day, right? It's not just, can you prescribe the right asthma medication and recognize this patient's stage of asthma? No, it's like, can you type? Can you communicate with your colleague? Can you convince the patient? Can you connect with the patient? Can you understand whether the patient can do an inhalation? Like, there are so many things that a clinician needs to do to be able to effectively intervene in a single patient encounter and with their team. And none of us could possibly have all of those skills at any one time. So we all have areas for growth. And the challenge is, if we acculturate self-confidence and overconfidence, then people feel like, well, I'm an excellent asthma doc. I prescribed all the medicines that I know how to prescribe, and I take great care of my patients, and nothing is going to help that person understand that they could be better because they don't even know what they don't know. And they don't know they're missing a whole variety of skills. So that permanent kind of humility, and with that comes curiosity about what am I missing? What could I do better? How can I provide better service for my patients? How can I be a better doctor, a healthcare professional? How can I help my teammates more? How can we improve our processes of care? That willingness to be curious and humble enough to make an impact and a difference is probably what I would want to acculturate the most.
It's almost a matter of insight and self-awareness as sort of a precursor and dependency for a willingness to learn and develop and apply new skills. Is that a fair characterization as I sort of
Yeah. I
summarize?
mean, if I said to you, listen, Stephen, I'd like you to come and I'd like to teach you how to count to 10, you'd be like, hold on, Graham, I
Yeah,
think I know how to count to 10.
right.
I don't think that's going to be a good use of my time. Right. But if I tell you and you're an asthma doc and I say, listen, come and learn mastery skills in asthma, and you're like, I kind of know asthma. I'm an asthma doc, right? Surely I know asthma. Not only you're not going to come, but if you come to a session where you're like, I know all these names of these medicines. They're all saying the words that I recognize. I'm not going to invest in this learning experience because I'm a good asthma doc. And until you're forced to maybe look and get feedback, maybe do an assessment, look at a chart review, see some asthma goals that you're not meeting, our immediate instinct in most circumstances say, well, my patients are more complicated. My system is more limited. I have fewer resources. My team is too small, whatever it is. But very few people say, maybe I'm just not doing what I should be doing in my care, in my practice and care. There's probably things I can do differently that would really help. Yes, these systems have to improve as well, but there are things that I can actually do for me to make me a better clinician. And that's what I would love to see us promulgate, is this idea that we can be better. And for administration and leadership in medicine and healthcare to know your teams can function better. They can be more efficient. They can be more effective if you invest in them in the right way.
So if organizations if they declare we want to achieve a goal, and again, it can be a variety of different goals, and patient experience, team engagement, turnover, so sort of the non-clinical domains, and they say we want to apply a skill development or people development strategy to allow us to sync our learning approach to our goals. What would you advise as sort of a best practice for those leaders that say, we're going to use human development to achieve goals, which I think we're both speaking about right now and its power? What would you advise in terms of an approach to really bring that to life?
Yeah, I think you have to have a very deliberate approach that is as focused on data and outcomes as you would be with finance and investment. And the beauty here is that you have a whole cadre of faculty and educational specialists that know how to do this and do it right. And if instead your default is, yeah, we want to reduce asthma readmission rates, and you say, okay, well, we can do a CME on asthma, and that's where the period goes, shame on you, because that is such a missed opportunity. Because if you say instead, what can we do to advance the performance and capabilities of our teams to implement ideal asthma care? And let's think of an educational learning and training experience that is going to maximize the performance of our teams. Now, educators can fall into that problem and deliver a terrific longitudinal program that uses mastery learning, checkpoints, repetition, reminders, consolidation, performance enhancement, data-based outcomes, skill development processes. There's so much you can do. And the data and the science is there that human performance can be managed and improved. And learning is the way to achieve that. That is a vastly underutilized approach to thinking about human performance and team management as an organization. And I'll just say that one of the things that also generates a furrowed brow is when I say to healthcare leaders, how are you managing the performance of your people? And they go, what? Because there is this idea that humans in healthcare are supposed to manage themselves and their own performance, and that it's not our job as leaders in healthcare to do so. So you need to empower educators, leverage the science of learning and development, and recognize you have capability and opportunity to make a difference by implementing meaningful change that enhances performance, and you can do it.
What I'm hearing you say is that the application of the development of learning culture, continuous improvement culture, and the application of human development to achieve outcomes is a continuous process and not a lecture. Is that a fair characterization?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is definitely not a lecture.
Right, right. So it's a cultural attribute that we use human development as a mechanism to achieve something. And
That's exactly right. I couldn't have said it better myself.
so as we look at this, I want to get back to um, the evidence that the application of people development drives outcomes. And again, I think all of us, I'm from Sharp Healthcare and was a family medicine physician there, and we applied a massive people development strategy to drive all sorts of different outcomes. And I saw personally for myself as my N of one, learning and applying new skills to be a better colleague, to be better for patients, to be a better team leader was life-changing in
Mhm.
terms of how I experienced the clinical life, right? And so came to be that I became more contributory to what we wanted to become as an organization, but I also found great contentment in becoming better in that process. So the question is, as we look to sync on the strategy of broad people development to drive outcomes, is I I want to hear your best evidence that people development drives ROI, because everybody's saying, well, how do we get our money back? And how does this investment, how can I justify this investment in our balance sheet for our organization? What's your go-to evidence that investing in the skills of your people drives ROI for decision makers that are allocating resources?
Yeah, it's if when sometimes when I talk to healthcare leaders, they'll ask me a question just like that, and the what they're actually looking for is reason not to do it, which I know is not where you're coming from.
Right.
But what there's because they know that you can't produce a singular study that says, do strategic plans work? Right? That's a ridiculous question. Okay. It has so many dependencies that a broad question like, does education work or does strategic planning work, doesn't have an answer because it can't, because it depends. And it has so many elements to it to make it depend. But there are a couple of key things to know. First of all, can humans learn? Definitely yes. Does that include healthcare professionals? Absolutely. So, do we know that they can learn? Absolutely. Are they motivated to learn? Absolutely. Time and time again, you ask healthcare professionals about their interest in performance development, learning development, all those kinds of things. It's exceptionally high. They're a very motivated group. They really want to learn. They're motivated for mastery. They want to provide great care. Um, can you create an educational experience that drives learning constructively? Absolutely, yes. You can create a whole variety of different learning experiences that capitalize on cognitive development and that use a whole variety of strategies that educators know very well, that have been studied every way from Sunday, that work. And they include things like participatory, active learning approaches, group-based learning, um, and with reminders and repetition and consolidation. Yes, all of those things definitely work. So humans can learn, that includes healthcare professionals. You can create educational experiences that drive that learning improvement. Fourthly, does learning improvement drive skill development and actual performance change? Absolutely, yes. Again, proven time and time again, you create a positive educational experience with motivated learners who are engaged in that process, they show manifest abilities to improve their skill. And can that skill generation improve patient outcomes and processes of care and community-based outcomes? Again, the evidence is absolutely clear that yes, those skill improvements improve patient outcomes, community wellness, all of those factors that you know. Lastly, they say, well, what's the ROI? And I say it depends what you're looking at and where you spend your money. But is investment in education and performance management for professionals cost effective? Absolutely. Because it's so low cost of an intervention, bringing people together to help them present their cases of the week and help them grow together as a group, and feed them some cookies. I mean, it's such a low cost intervention and so effective for driving a core d'esprit, an engagement, a belonging, a feeling of self esteem, a feeling of contribution, and getting all the way up those human needs we've been talking about. That these things are super easy to do. They're welcomed by professionals when easily constructed. They meet all sorts of regulatory requirements, but they help the organization get to their goals.
It just lifts my heart to be able to hear you talk about all the different interventions that can be done to raise human performance. And as I look at my life to date, which mostly was in the exam room with patients, but now I have sort of dedicated myself, if you will, to this idea of people development. The driving force in making that pivot from the exam room to sort of a teacher educator was what I saw happen to care team members as a result of becoming better for patients, better for each other, better for themselves. And to use a silly example, what's it like to play a round of golf when you're hitting the ball sweetly down the fairway, and what it's like to top it and lose 8 balls along the way. The process of mastery and becoming better at our craft and all the 5,000 domains. I don't know how we're able to manifest that future state for us as clinicians without that mastery, continuous improvement, always learning mindset. So anyway, I'm super grateful for the work that you've done. Um, One of the other questions I have is that, and again, I want to sort of take this back to you personally in terms of how you have applied the idea of mastery, growing, and learning to get to where you want to be in life. And I'm sure you're reading books sort of as we speak. So how have you incorporated this idea of continuous development in your life to help you get to where you are right now?
Uh, that's a toughie, but I mean, two things cross my mind in kind of belief systems that I hold dear that I try and live out. And one is um, accountability, and the second is practice what you preach. And both of those are pretty hard because they're not very self-caring, right? They require me to be thoughtful of, am I doing the right thing? Am I being the best colleague to my teammates and to my patients? Am I being the best I can be? And uh, that mindset of saying I'm accountable and I should always be doing the best I can, it drives me to do my reading, to do my research, to ask the real questions, not to rely on the radiology report, but look at the images, ask those deeper questions about patients' values, whatever it is that helps me do my work. And then if my team asks me to do something, not just delivering, but over delivering when I can. And then they do the same for me. But then practicing what I preach is really about modeling and ensuring that I'm, you know, doing the things that I think are really important. So when I say, we really should follow up with such and such a patient and see how they're doing, not just throw that into the air and ask one of my colleagues to pick it up, but either take it on myself or share those responsibilities with a colleague so that I'm, if they ask me to do something, I do it. If I ask them to do something, they do it, so that we support each other. But then practicing what I preach in the way in which I apply what I'm learning to the care of patients and showing that you can change the way you do things, and your patients will benefit. And my teammates see that all the time.
And the literature behind learning, development, mastery, and growth driving individual well-being. I know we've sort of implied that it's more enriching to engage in a mastery journey to become who we aspire to be and be immensely proud of who we are, and to live into our core belief system where it's playing out in our behaviors. Um, but talk a little bit more specifically about, if an organization says the engagement and well-being of our care teams is really important, and we want to apply, and we believe that human development can achieve all sorts of outcomes, and we want to map it specifically to the well-being of our teams. Talk a little bit about how that approach might be deployed and what sort of outcomes one could expect of mapping a people development strategy to something like well-being.
Well, I think you're clearly onto something here, Stephen, because teams are very important in the way in which we deliver healthcare and the way in which we support healthcare individuals. And teams in healthcare are so important because they're generally surrounded by people of complementary skills, who are sophisticated in their mastery of those skills, and that have a shared motivation to do right, and a shared ecosystem in which they do their work. Right, that's a lot of very positive ingredients that make for a very strong culture of mutual reinforcement and interpersonal care. But teams, in many cases, are very substantially underutilized and very frequently disrupted in healthcare. Um, a strategy to try and augment the performance of a team that's actually surprisingly simple to introduce and implement is to get the team to set aside some time to teach each other something once a week. So, for example, like our diabetes team where I work, we meet once a week to go over our most intensive, most challenging patients for an hour. We get through about 20 patients in that hour, but the first 10 minutes or so, one of us picks up a stick essentially and picks a topic, and we teach each other. And that means I get to learn from my nutritionist what she has to say about carb counting or what have you. I learn from my pharmacist, our case manager, our social worker about how we bring our skills to the care of patients and something new that they've learned in their environment. That creates a culture of mutual understanding. Complementarity of our skills is evident, and there isn't an obvious hierarchy. Um, because I don't claim that hierarchy, or I don't claim that position. But now there's a position of multiple reliance on each other where I can say to my social worker, or he can say to me, hey, this is what's going on. This is where I need your help. You have a skill in that area. Can you help me make an impact that I need to have on the patient using the following, tools that you have? So it makes us as a team much more effective. So I think the skill here for a leader in healthcare is to encourage teams to spend a couple of minutes every week to have a rotating role to teach each other something new. And just that 10 or 15 minutes once a week is a powerful instrument for driving a culture of mutual respect that will actually augment the team's performance and ultimately the outcomes for patients.
And I've seen that play out specifically where people have the chance to sort of teach those on their team. People have a chance to sort of receive wisdom from somebody that they is in a different discipline, for that interdisciplinary idea exchange, and kind of the friendships and the comfort and the psychological safety and the respect that all is emboldened by that endeavor. Um, a funny story. This is not a funny story, but something similar, where I was working with a group of hospitalists, and they were deploying hospitalist nurse bedside rounding. And everybody said, can't do it, too busy, overwhelmed. And, this hospitalist group was just redlined, and the nurses were redlined in terms of how exhausting their work was. But we were going to apply sort of a mastery skill development process on how we could round together at the bedside of the patient. And the stories and the testimonies that emerged as clinicians and nurses got together to learn the skill of rounding effectively together was not only quantitatively transformative in terms of after rounding calls, the amount of time it took to complete rounding, what the patient experience was to see the physician and the nurse round together. But the stories from the nurses and the hospitalists were about, I have a new set of friends on the med surg floor. The comfort and the approachability of that we have for each other. I got invited to one of their weddings, and just this community that emerged as a byproduct of us learning something together is such an incredible experience for those that receive it and participate in it. Not unlike dedicating 10 minutes a week for your diabetes team to exchange, ideas and best practices where you are. And I could tell you 1,000 stories of just the power of human
I could
development
tell
and
you
what it
mine
does.
too, because all of us have stories about how when you elevate people's capability to be together and leverage each other's strengths to do better, that everyone benefits. And there's just two examples I'll tell you about. One was at the start of month-long rotations where we were redlined as a team. We would take an evening and go to the art museum and do these little exercises in front of art as a team coming onto a medical service to just level set the absence of a hierarchy on this team. And the nurse and the physical therapist, et cetera, would join this inpatient medical care team. And they were really transformative for the relationships and the zen on the team that resulted from us having a little bit more trust and engagement in each other from little exercises that we did outside of the hospital. And the second was the work that we had to do to enhance geographic care team care provision by rounding by nurse. So we rounded by nurse, for example, on the inpatient care team. And all of a sudden, the nurse was the first person to talk about their story with the patient and their experience of the patient before the medical team said anything. And that was just a great effect of driving team engagement and nurse engagement in the medical care of patients that were under their service. And when the hospital threatened to remove this particular service from the floor, the nurses were the ones who revolted because now they knew the docs and the medical teams that were on their floor. Now they felt participants in the patient care, not just transactional
Mhm.
individuals. And it made a huge difference for the overall quality of care as well as the feeling of people being on those floors and on those teams.
Graham, there's an interesting exercise to reinforce what you were just saying. Sometimes I'll get teams together and I'll ask them to reflect on what's the best team experience you've ever had in your life, in or out of healthcare. And then I have them think on their own for a minute. Then they gather in groups of two and exchange their stories, and then gather as a table for 3 or 4 minutes and identify themes. And it's always the same theme. I felt safe. We were serving a purpose bigger than any one of us. We liked each other. We laughed together. We teased each other. We lifted each other. We were there for each other. There was like these attributes that are always present in the vitality of a really amazing team. And then if you look at it from the perspective that you speak about applying, how do we apply skill development so the actions and behaviors of that high performing team occurs across all of our teams? And what that would do to the ability, not just for team-based care, but what it's like to work at a place.
Yep. But a lot of people make the assumption that, well, teams should be self-forming, um, and that they will self-form if we just put people in kind of the right place and make them available to each other. And that is crazy because that's not how
Right.
things happen. And they assume that once they are created, they don't need to be nurtured and sustained, and that you don't need essentially people who know what they're doing in terms of human performance management to elevate the structure and capacity of that team and nurture it in
Right.
a productive way.
Well, it is, and the idea of human development as a cultural trait, as opposed to a course, a certification, or even a cohort, is, I think, a critical mindset shift. And have you seen, or can you cite, without revealing organizations without their permission, organizations in or out of healthcare that have built continuous improvement and human development as a dedicated, resourced commitment to how we will achieve our goals? Can you give us sort of a referential example of where that's worked and been done?
Um, I mean, without naming individual institutions, I've seen it several times, but it's much more typical not to see it.
Right.
Okay. And you have too, right? These things can be done. These things are being done in a variety of places, but unfortunately, they're still special. And everyone else says, oh, well, it's special over there because they have resources that we don't. But that is not true, right? This is not a resource limited intervention or a resource constrained intervention. These are very simple things to do, really. Well, they're not simple. They're simple to implement if you know what you're doing, but any leadership, anyone listening to this call right now could do these things. And if you're committed to elevating the performance capability of your people, and you believe that those people are really precious and that they are human and that they have capacity beyond what they're currently doing, and it's your responsibility to support them and make sure that they are not in an ecosystem that's burning them out, but instead sustaining, rescuing, transforming, nurturing them, you can do a whole variety of things very simply to change the culture inside an organization.
I've always seen, I know we're almost out of time and I could talk to you forever, but I've always seen human development as like an enzyme, right? We've got a substrate, which is our current state, our product, which is our future state, and we've got an activation energy that we've got to get over to
Mhm.
facilitate that
I
interaction.
love it. I love it. I'm an
And
endocrinologist, remember? What do I not love about
I
enzymes?
was a biochemistry major. So but it is, and to get to a future state, and whether that future state is safety behaviors everywhere with zero harm, or whether that future state is the experience of patients that walk out and say, this place, this team's amazing, and everybody I know, love, and care about has got to come here for their care, or team collaboration where they say, man, our team is like a family. I mean, we help each other, support each other, and get amazing care delivered together as a team, or even leadership effectiveness, right? Our ability to lead in a way that enriches and engages the people that we lead. All of those are potential substrates that we could map human development to. And the variance of all of those skills are wild, in terms of, I've shadowed almost 1,000 clinicians over the last 20 years. And even with the positive bias of being in the exam room, watching a clinician, they have no idea that they're not doing things in regards to the simple mechanics of patient connectivity. Anyway, we could go on, but I think that the high level theme, and then I'm going to pass it to you for sort of a final thought, is the application of human development as a mechanism to build the skills and the capacity to execute change for patients, for care teams, for individual care team members, and the communities we serve, I think is a almost entirely untapped and unbelievably powerful change mechanism that I think is a requirement for us to execute what we must as American healthcare. So that's my final thesis on life. But I would love to hear your parting words on what you want our listeners to walk away with. The final wisdoms, if you will, the actionable insights uh, from you, one of the national
Oh,
leaders
stop.
at
It's
human development. I would love to hear your final thoughts.
I I think there has to be a change in how we think about our healthcare people. It's not a workforce, it's a collection of people, each of whom have their own needs and and limitations. But what anchors many in the healthcare professions is this motivation to care, to do the best they can, highly capable cognitive capacity. Um, and if you inject into that the opportunity to do highly effective, learning and CME in teams, in small groups, in active learning environments, and you put them in a culture where they can actually implement some of what they're learning into their ecosystem, uh, you will be shocked at how such a simple intervention can really transform the performance of your people. But you first have to believe at your core that your people are really precious and that you can invest in them and you can support them, and in doing so you'll be the beneficiary of that investment because it's not substantial. I think the second thing is that learning and education are skills, and that it is prudent and wise to leverage educational specialists, whether they're healthcare professionals themselves or outside of healthcare, who know how to support you in leading this change, because there are real skills in constructing a productive and positive learning environment. And it is on the rest of us to leverage those skills to make these implementations if we are struggling to do it by ourselves. And I think the third thing is to recognize that the ecosystem in continuing education, like at ACCME, is here to support you. We are not in your way. We are not uh, authoritarian that way, or creating regulations that limit the capacity or impact or dissemination of high quality education. We're in your corner. We want you to succeed. And that if you ever get told, no, you can't do that, and you think it's a productive learning experience, question that, because it's probably a rumor. And we hear that all the time. ACCME says you can't do that. Not so fast. There's a lot of things that you can do because we are educational evangelists too. And we really want you to succeed and leverage the power of learning to drive the performance and improvement that our health system so desperately needs, and leverage the remarkable capacity of the people that are in it.
Well, so beautifully said. And I would contend that you tap any care team member on the shoulder who has been a participant in that human development experience with a team as an individual, to allow them to lean into their fundamental purpose and reason for being. They'll say that was one of the best things that we've ever done.
Yeah,
So
I couldn't agree. It's like having somebody at your elbow who's guiding you to do the right thing. That's what education can do. That's what we really value, is learning from experts and benefiting from the wisdom of others.
beautiful, beautiful. Well, Graham, I am so grateful for you, the work that you're doing, the impact that you're creating, and for ACCME. And we've had a lot of experience with you with our joint accreditation at Practicing Excellence. And it's an amazing organization that is all about innovation and how we can do this better, and the spirit of continuous improvement, even in where you are. So greatly appreciative for you, your personal commitment, and your professional impact. Thank you, and keep up the great work. And you have a new friend in the world. How's that?
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for being jointly accredited and for all the work you do to evangelize all of our shared goal here to advance human performance and ultimately healthcare for our people.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for attending This Clinical Life, and have an amazing day. And we are out.